An asylum seeker is a person who leaves their country of residence, enters another country and applies for asylum in this other country. An asylum seeker is an immigrant who has been forcibly displaced and might have fled their home country because of war or other factors harming them or their family. If their case is accepted, they become considered a refugee. The terms asylum seeker and refugee are often confused. A person becomes an asylum seeker by making a formal application for the right to remain in another country and keeps that status until the application has been concluded. The relevant immigration authorities of the country of asylum determine whether the asylum seeker will be granted protection and become an officially recognized refugee or whether asylum will be refused and the asylum seeker becomes an illegal immigrant who may be asked to leave the country and may even be deported. In North American English, the term asylee is also used. An asylee can either be an asylum seeker, as defined above, or a person whose claim for asylum was accepted and asylum was granted. On average, about 1 million people apply for asylum every year. The asylum seeker may be recognized as a refugee and given refugee status if their circumstances fall into the definition of refugee according to the 1951 Refugee Convention or other refugee laws, such as the European Convention on Human Rights, if asylum is claimed within the European Union. However, signatories to the Refugee Convention create their own policies for assessing the protection status of asylum seekers, and the proportion of asylum applicants who are accepted or rejected varies each year from country to country. Asylum as an institution is not restricted to the category of individuals who qualify for refugee status. On the contrary, this institution predates the birth of the international regime for the protection of refugees. Asylum seekers who have committed crimes against peace, a war crime or a crime against humanity, or other serious non-political crimes, or whose actions are contrary to the purposes and principles of the United Nations, are excluded from international protection. As of 1 July 2013, there were 145 parties to the 1951 Refugee Convention and 146 to the 1967 Protocol. These states are bound by an obligation under international law to grant asylum to people who fall within the definition of convention and protocol. The refugee definitions of 1951 and 1967 are the strictest and most exclusive, and persons who fall within this definition are called convention refugees and their status is called convention refugee status. Persons who do not fall within this definition may still be granted complementary forms of protection if they fall within other refugee definitions. The practical determination of whether a person is a refugee or not is most often left to certain government agencies within the host country. In some countries, the refugee status determination is done by the UNHCR. The burden of substantiating an asylum claim lies with the claimant, who must establish that they qualify for protection. In many countries, country of origin information is used by migration officials as part of the assessment of asylum claims, and governments commission research into the accuracy of their country reports. Some countries have studied the rejection rates of their migration officials making decisions, finding that individuals reject more applicants than others assessing similar cases, and migration officials are required to standardize the reasons for accepting or rejecting claims, so that the decision of one adjudicator is consistent with what their colleagues decide. The refugee definition of the 1951 Convention is universally binding. But there are many other definitions according to which protection may be offered to people who do not fall within this definition. Subsidiary protection is an international protection for persons seeking asylum who do not qualify as refugees. It is an option to get asylum for those who do not have a well-founded fear of persecution, but do indeed have a substantial risk to be subjected to torture or to a serious harm if they are returned to their country of origin, for reasons that include war, violence, conflict and massive violations of human rights. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights and European Union law have a broader definition of who is entitled to asylum. Temporary protection visas are used to persons in Australia who applied for refugee status after Making an unauthorized arrival. It is the main type of visa issued to refugees when released from Australian immigration detention facilities, and they are required to reapply for it every 3 years. Asylum seekers may be given refugee status on a group basis. Refugees who went through the group status determination are also referred to as prima facie refugees. This is done in situations when the reasons for seeking refugee status are generally well